Boa tarde, Brasil. Sejam todos muito bem-vindos à 7ª Brasil Conference, pela primeira vez aqui no Brasil. Particularmente, como empreendedor, eu admiro muito o que o time da Brasil Conference se desafiou a fazer esse ano. Falar de Brasil, de futuro de Brasil, no meio de uma pandemia global, no meio de uma discussão política e de uma reestruturação empresarial no Brasil, é muito desafiador.
O desafio agora da gente fazer esse evento em modelo híbrido, no auge da pandemia no Brasil, primeiramente são os cuidados com a saúde e segurança de todos os envolvidos, porque por mais que não pareça, a gente está rodando um evento. A gente tem que cuidar da segurança de todo mundo em primeiro lugar e a gente também tem que, ao mesmo tempo, garantir que o evento vai rodar e que os espectadores vão estar tirando algo produtivo do evento que a gente está realizando.
Dialogar para transformar significa que a gente não tem as respostas, mas a gente promoveu o debate. O Brasil Conference deixa esse legado super plural para a gente conseguir encontrar saídas para um momento de Brasil que está vivendo. Bom dia, Brasil! Sejam super bem-vindos ao último dia da 7ª edição da Brasil Conference, pela primeira vez aqui no Brasil, diretamente do Rio de Janeiro. Nós estamos no Cristo Redentor e eu gostaria muito de agradecer o nosso parceiro, Grupo Cataratas, por ter viabilizado isso. Meu nome é Hector Guzmão, eu sou presidente e cofundador da Fábrica Startup. Estou aqui com meu amigo Gabriel, tudo bem?
Tudo bem, Hector, e com você?
Tudo ótimo, já ficando com saudade e agradecendo tanto o Gabriel, que é um dos co-presidentes da Brasil Conference desse ano, junto dos outros co-presidentes e equipe que estão diretamente de Boston. Estou super feliz de ter trabalhado ao longo desses 7 dias, levando muito conteúdo relevante. Foram 25 painéis discutindo o lema desse ano, que é dialogar para transformar. Foram mais de 25 horas de conteúdo, a gente já está passando 300 mil visualizações nos nossos canais, inclusive no canal de um dos nossos parceiros, que é o Estadão, e mais do que 110 painelistas dialogaram ao longo desses dias para a gente encontrar respostas para o futuro do Brasil. Mas, Gabriel, a equipe da Brasil Conference desse ano, que viabilizou tudo isso, soma-se quantas pessoas?
A gente queria aqui também, como o Hector falou, agradecer a nossa equipe inteira, que soma 55 pessoas, fora os 4 co-presidentes que aparecem, a gente também tem mais 51 pessoas que ajudaram a gente a realizar essa conferência, né?
Muito legal. E a gente vai chegando, infelizmente, a gente já está ficando com saudade desse último dia, anunciando um pouco do que será. A gente vai ter 2 blocos nessa parte da manhã, depois na parte da tarde, com muitos temas e painelistas relevantes para discussões. A gente começa agora, depois dessa nossa breve abertura, o primeiro painel, que é o fortalecimento do SUS, onde a gente vai ter Armínio Fraga, Luiz Henrique Mandetta, Lígia Bahia, Carlos Gadelha. Às 12h45 teremos um painel especial com Jorge Paulo Lema, Fabrício Bloise e Nietzsche Nória. Depois dessa parte da manhã, a gente ainda tem painel até o final da tarde. E, Gabriel, compartilha pra gente o que vai acontecer.
Pois é, depois da parte da manhã, a gente volta às 5h30 com o painel dos embaixadores da Brasil Conference, moderado pelo Bernardinho. E às 7 horas, para encerrar a conferência, a gente tem o painel Os Desafios do Brasil, com Ciro Gomes, Eduardo Leite, Fernando Haddad, João Dória, Luciano Huck e moderado por Eliane Cantanhede e Hussein Kaluch.
Depois desse painel, a gente vai ter o encerramento, sim, da Brasil Conference. A gente vai passar um vídeo com os melhores momentos dessa semana intensa e, diretamente de Boston, 3 co-presidentes que, infelizmente, não puderam estar aqui com a gente, vão entrar com o Gabriel para vocês baterem um papo e contarem tudo o que aconteceu nessa semana e o que a gente espera da Brasil Conference de 2022, que certamente vai ser tamanho sucesso que foi esse ano. Para dar início ao último dia da Brasil Conference, eu queria chamar o primeiro painel dessa manhã, que é o fortalecimento do SUS. Um bom evento, pessoal, e a gente se vê logo mais.
Hello, good morning to you all. My name is Adora, and I have the double graduation of um, I study business administration. It is with pleasure that I present to you the panel on health of the seventh edition of the Brazil Conference, which will have this theme, the strengthening of the SUS unified health system, considering the legacy of the pandemic in the next years. In a moment in our country where we discuss so much the mistakes of the past, we'll need to focus on what we'll have to get right in the future and regarding health in Brazil. It was being moderated by Márcia Castro, professor associate of the public school in public health school of Harvard. Good morning. Thank you, Zadora. Thank you, Brazil Conference, for making room for this discussion on health. Our panel has a great team, and we start with Dr. Arminio Fraga, who is economist and former president of the Central Bank, and from 1999 to 2002, a founder of this Institute of Studies for Health Policies, which has given a great contribution to the current debate. Dr. Carlos Gardelha, of the presidency of Fiocruz, with a broad experience in innovation and health. Dr. Lígia Bahia, Associate Professor of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, one of the people who most understands about health policies and above all about the SUS. Dr. Luiz Henrique Mandetta, who is a physician and who was Minister of Health during the first weeks of the pandemic, the first months. I ask you, all the speakers, to be brief because we have much to discuss. I'd like to start with a question, a broad question to each one of you. I'd like you to make an initial reflection of something like 3 minutes. And the question is, how to strengthen and improve SUS for next years and the years to come. So I'd like to start with Dr. Lígia Bahia. Good morning. I'd like to start by thanking very much for the invitation. It is an honor and a joy to be here with such interesting people. As I saw, I include myself. So I think the question is important. We need to get things wrong. We can't make any more mistakes given the tragedy we're experiencing, the health tragedy, along with a humanitarian tragedy. And in order to not make more mistakes and to strengthen SUS, we need to make explicit the purposes of SUS. What are the purposes of SUS? We want Brazilians to live longer. We want to reduce maternal mortality. We want to reduce the mortality of children below 5 years of age. Those axes are fundamental. We won't have a strengthened SUS if we only discuss a number of beds. So it is essential. An economist said, it won't help to discuss health policies without ethics. What are the people who will be provided care? How will we will provide care for them? Today we are between ECMO, which ECMO is that equipment which allows an extracorporeal circulation and people who don't find a place. And how will we solve this? We won't solve this only by talking about things, about beds, about the amount of doctors available. We need to have values, and we need to encourage disagreement. Those who diverge, who consider SUS is, there are those who consider SUS has to do with a universal right for health, and whereas others do not. So we expect that this debate on values, the political debate, it should be encouraged in Brazilian society, and this way will strengthen SUS, the unified health system, which is the operational leg of the right for health. And it is precisely that right for health. Then if we have right for health, then we have the strengthened SUS. Otherwise, we won't have something important, but something that fills the moments we need most. Thank you very much, Lígia. Dr. Arminio. Thank you. It is a pleasure to be here as well with this group on the screen and with students from the university environment. This is one of our most favorite environments. Well, SUS, the Unified Health System, was born with a mission, a constitutional mission, a universal mission, as was said, and it showed throughout the years its value. However, curiously, the 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 place for SUS in the budget was never what we imagined. So I would say that that is where the strengthening starts. But the place, the room for it in the budget is surprising. In a country that chose as a model the English system, where 80–90% of the expenditure in health takes place within the public system, the country that made this choice, which is ours, spends less than 50% with SUS. I think less than 45% of the health expenditure goes to this unified health system, and 75% of the population depends on it. So it is a matter of priority, as was said, is a political matter, an ethical matter as well, which is kind of lost and not finding its way, regardless of there being a success. The latest happenings show how important it is. Brazil has much to show in that sense. But on the other hand, it is a system that today suffers from this terrible situation that the world is going through, which is that of the pandemic. And deep inside, it is frustrating because why is it that when having SUS, we can't make more than we're doing? So this might be like an alert message, calling attention to this lack of priority, lack of prioritization there has been. I don't have the knowledge the other colleagues here have. I won't mention the many things that have to be done to improve, to actually make it really universal. Think about technology, about research, management. There are many things to be done, but I think their focus should be, we should see things from a positive angle. There is a demand for SUS. SUS has proven to be throughout the years capable to deliver results which are measurable, actually. As Lígia said, and I think we want more. That is it. So it is somehow a dark moment we're going through. Our leaders, our leadership have not been available to take advantage of this potential. But this is what I had to say, basically, and thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Mandetta. How to strengthen and improve SUS in the years to come. Good morning to everyone. Good morning to the organizing commission who made this invitation, Marcia Castro, with whom I've already discussed public health, Lígia Gadelha, Arminio. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. Well, our system, well, Lígia addressed the point, values, ethics, equity, which are principles which guide us in the sense of universality. And we still work, we don't work on those principles so much in order to put things into context to see how will our integrality will be, what concept of integrality we're talking about, what kind concept of equity we're talking about. That was done by means of uses and customs. The biggest social epidemiological observatory of the line of life of every Brazilian, which goes from birth, early childhood to old age, directly related to decision making, using this system as a guide, as a light for the transformation that is necessary. Every time we measure the intervention of SUS within well-organized policies, and we can mention PNI and the family health strategy, which are important policies which transformed things throughout the year, showing results of in terms of cost benefit for. But there is no sector that, if we do not, there's not a sector that is more important. If we talk about the industrial complex, about science and innovation, research, we will see how much we depend on 38 billion of negative trade balance because of our dependence on science and technology. So all these channels, they dialogue and they have this observatory, which is SUS, that should be taken as an element for decision making. But it will leave this pandemic strengthened, even because of how much it was despised, and even then it is resists by means of its unmeasurable capacity to open doors for the population. I see the SUS in a sad moment, but I see it strong as well as an element that today the whole of society is looking at it and saying, thank God we have SUS. There is no person in this country that doesn't see the presence of SUS in the vaccination and production and delivery, trying to mitigate problem in spite of the toxic leaders that ended up trying to undermine the basic structures of SUS, which are so solid that they resist in spite and as we say, our song says, in spite of you, tomorrow will be another day. There will always be the sun rising on the next day. Dr. Carlos Gadelha, please. First of all, I'd like to thank for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here. I love to talk to students. I think we are diverse. But we're here, but we have a convergence moment. I think SUS will gather good people. I think we need to think really about knowledge, formation, education, science at the service of society. So trying to specify that universal systems are not systems, poor systems for the poor. The universal systems are meant to provide care to the collectiveness, to society. So when we take an airplane, before there were 2 classes, then 3, now there are 10 different classes. We cannot have a SUS where aspirin is for all, the basic vaccines will get 3, 4 classes, and the medication for cancer would only be for the executive class. So SUS, before all, is a system of solidarity, social solidarity, a human collective view where we coexist in the same room. As was important for me to go to a public school with people with different levels of income, different diversity, and that is what and the field of science, technology, and innovation has proven to be central. We cannot have knowledge and technology for a few. I think there's a point which is how to create products, technology, ways of care, of prevention that may allow SUS to be sustainable. And from the point of view is from the technological point of view, and it is a big challenge. We have an acceleration in time, as the vaccine that had been created in shortest time was 4 years. For COVID, it was 1 year, less than 1 year. So time got faster, was accelerated, but time accelerates, whereas distance increases. So this places a responsibility for students. So, how do we capture a rhythm, a capacity of knowledge in order to make feasible such central systems for the collective community as this health system?
Now, before talking directly about the future, I would like to request Professor Ligia and Mr. Mandetta to think about why SUS was underused and continues being underused during the pandemic. Please, Professor Ligia. Well, I think this is a central question. Thank you very much, Marcia. Because in fact, this was approved in the Constitution 1988, but we always had differences regarding the SUS. The implementation of the SUS was not linear. It was very, very difficult to achieve. So we have a SUS remain. It is very difficult because the universal health system and all the experiences abroad show this. It's very difficult to keep that. If this is approved, there's no way back. Exactly. That's the reason why we're so concerned today with this debate in the United States. It's a central debate in the United States. There's no going back. If there's no way back, once the SUS was approved, there were a lot of different opinions. The newspapers used to call Aroca a communist or red, and everybody he was being called the worst person in the universe. So the consensus that we have nowadays was not at the time of the Constitution 1988, but now currently we have a consensus. Everybody loves the SUS. Everybody's in favor of SUS. But of what SUS are we talking about? Surely, if we're going to look in details, it's not of the constitutional SUS. It's a SUS for poor people, a basic SUS. However, we don't have a basic SUS. We cannot have a basic health system. It's not a primary school. It's not a right to go up to 5th grade of primary school. Health is health. So it is, in fact, a great problem in Brazil. And during a period of time, let's talk about the components. We have an offer of private health in strategic areas. For example, in ICU beds, we've seen all the difficulties that this brings. In the labor force, we see great confusion. We have people that hire 50,000 people. It's a big, big company that doesn't solve the problems that we have for formation of health professionals and their participation in the health ministry. And the third element that is very important also is exactly not to update the information in Brazil. We have something very simple, an apps for vaccine, and even India is using this. Brazil is vaccinating without an apps. Now this is from the rock age. So regarding medication, vaccines, and so on, I think that data has already started to talk about this. And we have a lot of cuts for science and technology, cuts in the budget of science and technology ministry in the middle of the pandemic. So imagine, so Arminia has talked about also the funding about this compatible with SUS. We don't have a standard of funding for a health universal system. We have something guided for the market. And from the governance point of view, we have had four health ministers during the pandemics, and many health secretaries have been changed during the pandemics. So evidently that we're not in correct place. But in my understanding, there's a great problem of SUS. For SUS was the lack of basic care. And what was fundamental, there was a blockage in the second stage, detecting and separating symptomatic cases from asymptomatic cases and trying to promote self-isolation or distancing. This didn't happen because we don't have the testing during this period of time. So what is more capitalized? The ordinances of the SUS didn't foresee this. So SUS then started regarded the hospital part, and this hospital part was always a problem. And what was the best of the SUS remained without any kind of attendance, no oxygen and primary care, oximeter at the beginning of the pandemics, and all this made it quite difficult. And I think that today we will have to solve this in a way or another one very quickly. Thank you, Professor. Mr. Mandetta, why SUS was underused and under considered during the pandemic. But this virus came to provoke the world. It's not an individual problem. It's a problem of humanity. And the first stage, when I was still in the ministry, showed and disarticulated world without any kind of leadership, even to do the minimum of organization for individual protection equipment. I remember our meetings in SUS was very strong because I had CONASEM and CONAST to be together with me in the decision making. It was as if we were a tripartite permanent meeting. We used to talk one day and we used to the next day talk to the population. And the use of primary care was our strength. It was through this that we wanted to give the entrance to 340,000 community agents for health and 43,000 teams. And we were in the re-registration because this system showed 78 million of inhabitants and it had to cover 140 million. So the system was live and all the attention was focused on this. But without masks, without protection equipment, how could you put all these people to work in a situation of a permanent hiring? And so at the beginning of the process, our main focus was to equip our personnel in order for them to work. Then the capacity building, all the agents they were not trained for this to the level of intervention in an infectious disease that really brings a lot of fears because of their lack of preparation of this kind of work. So we started at that time to train specifically all this work task. And the only alternative we saw as possible at that time was to transform 136, that was one of the arms of the health ministry, and use TV to communicate everybody and the city, their blocking strategies. It was very difficult to have that strength, look at it, know that you have to use it, and not being able to have the measures because of a number of problems of the previous period. But at that time, it was a collapse of this model of the purchases, procurements of the whole world centralized in China. We have to review this about sanitary international regulation about this model. When China closed, they left a hole in the world, in the United States, going to China with a super planes, Italy without any material to work, and the nurses in the United Kingdom with no equipment at all. So this was very uncommon. I used to talk a lot to England, and they had difficulty to have their also SUS. Canada also had the same difficulty because of the same reason. So we don't have an isolated reason. Once you have the equipment, then we could see the training with our personnel. We're having the vaccine to vaccinate our health personnel. So now would be the time to use the total health force, because that's one of the pillars to face this disease. As you asked very specifically about the use of the power of SUS during the pandemics, I draw the attention, the primary attention as a entrance that would be our greatest strength, but this strength at the time, and then all the equipment, the oximeters and oxygen to do something at home, and multidisciplinary teams with physiotherapy, and also the SUS at the decision-making apparatus planned to face this in exclusion. In the slums, for example, was very bold. It started in Rio de Janeiro. It wasn't possible to have done this also for this lack of equipment, also for the interrupt on my work. But I see there what could have been done, a great difference, like during the cholera and HIV and many other diseases, that this primary attention was an entrance to find a solution. That was the first difficulty we had, the first moment. Thank you. I think we will continue collecting the results of the primary attention that was interrupted during a long time. The results are starting to appear. This has a long-term consequence. So now I would like to start this ideas about the next years. And this question will be for all of you. Once again, you're doing great, keeping your time. Let's continue like this to enrich in the moment. And so the idea now is considering this capillarity and coverage of SUS activities that if there are increased can be something fantastic. What do you see as a focus of the unified health system for the next years, considering the legacy of the pandemics? Let's see, I'm going to start with Dr. Gadelha. I would like to highlight the Fiocruz. For more than 20 years, I've been in a Congress talking about this. We used to bring a warn. This agenda of science, technology, and innovation in support to SUS is an agenda of SUS. It's not something else. These worlds are interdependent. Everything that Minister Mandetta mentioned now, at the same time, is an industrial product, it's technology, it's science. I don't have a basic care without mask. I don't do basic attention of the future without artificial intelligence data. One of the 80% of the patents are in 10 countries. The concentration of artificial intelligence, the basic care in the future, a genomic surveillance and intelligent one is not done without knowledge, without artificial intelligence, big data, for the reality of its population, and also with the care, with a lot of attention, and with home serum and attention, and how people should protect themselves. The essential issue, one of them, I'm not going to say it's, but one of the icon of the health public health, Cecilia Menard, says science and technology is not the cherry of the cake, it's the cake. We don't do more SUS, more universal care without the knowledge in order to consume less products. The most well-succeeded policy for cancer in Brazil was based on scientific knowledge that cigarette is bad for health. So this view of technology cannot be more drugs, more hamburgers, more cancer, and more drugs. No, that's not possible. This a technological standard, and I think a basic care is that, is traumatic and no closed view, old-fashioned view of productive system. But we can't depend on active drugs in 90%. The Brazilian market interferes in global market. API depends to protect the health professional. Macron just mentioned there's no reason for a country not to have the minimum capacity to take care of their people. So I think this challenge of considering SUS and health as central areas in a strategy of science, technology, and innovation, and even development, in reducing the differences is entirely vital. So reducing the differences by cooperation, partnership, and support of the state to SUS and to knowledge and science. Thank you, Dr. Carlos Gadelha. Dr. Arminio. Thank you. I will try to be adding some more ideas. I am the youngest of the group here in the field of health, so I consider myself not able to go very deep. But something that drew my attention here, besides the things that I mentioned at the beginning, was exactly a general state of a siege of health. So I think this has to be reconsidered. Regarding SUS, I've seen on one side a group saying, no, the problem is not money, it's management. And on the other hand, another group saying, no, it's not possible, showing the numbers that I've showed. This is not correct. And of course, SUS is not a priority of ours, of country, because our representatives have decided, consciously or not, of leaving this as it is. So I see nowadays those that want more technology, more information, more management, more data, and more integration, not only in the barrier of technology, but also in basic things, registries, and a capacity of identifying people. That's for all the social policies in Brazil, not only for health, something that can be integrated. I think Márcia has mentioned this in other forums, but I see a space to go ahead in two fronts, more money and more management. And I think the focus has to be in results. Why not having multiple focus side by side? Our government had three spheres and different levels, surely, basic attention, information technology, and public relation. But lastly, I think the main focus should be understand what is happening, which are the results, where are the gaps, and why they are not being solved. So I think that is a flaw in a political one. As a nation, we don't have priorities that are defined, and things happen just like that, and the holes continue increasing. Thank you, Dr. Arminio. Mr. Mandetta, we dare to include in Constitution a concept of social safety that quite increased, where you have health as safety concept like social security and family. That's a constitutional concept that was included. And we see the overlapping areas, and we see areas of decision-making in efforts that should be common to these areas done by islands that don't have a dialogue. This is the future SUS, and the size of the health system as a deciding element of these social safety policies that have by the Constitution have to be considered in an more comprehensive approach. The century 21 is going to be great to live in. Technology will help SUS to make it, to put an expert in areas of procurements and to give support to this new generation that comes to the health system with a fragile formation that can be for capacity building or for care. The genomic project for Brazil that was signed together with England to put 150,000 Brazilians into a genetic data bank that can be the great decision maker for treatments for cancer and for primary attention will change the way we are considering health, and is a challenge to these students to think in this revolution, post-industrial revolution, on the management of data, the big data, of innovation of technologies that come to add to the first concept of personal care that is not transferable, by providing a greater scale of possibilities for the advantage of technology. When I see in a meeting like this, Arminio Fraga, former president of Central Bank, talking about SUS, talking about his understanding that came into this policy of analyzing the possibilities of transformation and consider the SUS as an economical possibility for the country for a generation of revenues and to capture international resources, and multilateralism also that is also being considered. And SUS always set a multilateral tables for discussion in a very strong way. I was in GV in Osaka, and health ministers and economy ministers for decision-making for universal coverage in health, universal access for health. So the 20 most important economies in the world have considered health as a requirement for this Earth spaceship. So the subject of UN this year is a great restart, the reading. All our strategies have to be discussed, and this increase of thought will be good. I believe very much in the human being to take advantage of a crisis, what we should do in 20-25 years. The investment is so great that this crisis will have new good things. Technology of vaccines with RNA, isn't that the departure for dengue or malaria? What do we have in the future? The discussion of vaccine as a global asset. We in PAHO in the United States, and this is in the organization of OMS to discuss this, how to change WHO, I'm sorry, how to change the patent, or do we have a worldwide share to increase the distribution of technology to vaccinate 80% of the 8 billion of people in the world? Because the United States thinks that if they only vaccinate their country, the problem is over. The strain can be in another place, can be in Africa, here in Latin America. So the worldwide leadership have to have a Brazilian concept of social safety increased, and this is the future that humanity will have, like in climate and sustainability, environment, and also universal right to access for education. And it has to be converging force. And I believe that the future goes through this. Simply looking at our constitution, considering the concept is much more comprehensive. Let's stop overlapping. Let's optimize our resources, knowing that we're a developing country and that we can very much do with our resources to reach a better result. I think SUS is mature and ready to receive a lot of other conditions, considering that they converge to the values that Lígia just mentioned. Thank you, Minister. I just hope that international leaders will also be have the solidarity, because I think we have to have geopolitics for scientific movement and the disclosure, because SUS on Earth needs vaccines, and it will be the last one to receive. So I hope there we need a virus called solidarity that to spread much more than SARS-CoV-2. I'm sorry that I mentioned this, but I had to.
I agree. So what is the final purpose? To increase in the United States, for example, they spent months. So that will solve. What is the policy? We lost years of life where this policy with prohibition of abortion and the structural racism of Brazilian society, but you need to break the eggs to make an omelet. For example, public health is this area which manages to understand, make evident what are the social determinations, but not everybody agrees. For example, we agree that every Brazilian should have 6 guns, or do we agree that it's not possible to use incarceration as a social policy? We increased our prison population, and even then the number of homicides grew 7-fold. So what are the policies that allow us to gain years of life with quality of life? That is a purpose of health. A purpose of health needs to be more health. So, and the policies need to be compatible with that. It doesn't matter if we are in favor or against abortion. It is a matter of public health. And guns are a matter of public health. Climate change are a matter of public health. So we need to be in favor of, and besides, if we are in favor of the purposes of the goals, then we must have a compatible funding, a compatible workforce, etc., adequate to these ends, to these goals. If we do not discuss, things are seen as if it was a consensus, and it is not. But like vaccines do not solve the problem of inequality. If we don't fight inequality in Brazil, it won't help. Those evidence about COVID are dramatic and painful. Who died, who did not die, those who had care and those who did not have care. The Miguel who died in Recife, he is not a portrait of Brazilian society of a child who had a maid who had to take her son to work. Her school was closed, and the boy died. Henry, he dies of a pandemic. It is a social structure. The father-in-law is a doctor, Dr. Jairinho. No, Jairinho, which is cute. So if we do not reform the police, if we're not against the militias, we will not obtain better health conditions. Those purposes need to be discussed. They're not a consensus in no way whatsoever. On the contrary, what we have today is passing of two pieces of legislation, one in favor of the private vaccination, another one in favor of the private beds. So our representatives are against SUS at this moment, when Brazil becomes the center, the epicenter of the pandemic in international pariah. And in order to finish, well, I agree with you. That map we had in the beginning of the pandemic, that put in red in the United States with a big amount of dead, United Kingdom, Belgium, etc., it changes with the vaccine. So actually, there was a certain spreading of the vaccine, but when it comes to have a strategy, resolution of trying to control this pandemic, then the map shows again the horror of inequality, the north-south inequality, and the inequality between Europe and Asia, etc. So I think, in fact, we need to talk about it. But I'd like to remark that I'd like very much for us to diverge, disagree, not only have a convergence because we are in the same field. Every day is a day to talk about health, but to talk seriously about health. Health cannot be political rhetoric. It needs to have concrete consequences. So we can't be in favor of people having guns or be in favor of racism. Professor Lisa, thank you very much, because I think your speech made clear that we cannot divide social matters, issues into boxes. We cannot separate economy from health. So everybody is interconnected. Racism is related to health, climate is related to health. In order to leave this pandemic, we need to bring the social sciences. And for the students, if you want to work in public health, it won't be enough to be a doctor. You need to understand the origins. You need to read history. You need to understand the context. So you need economics, demography, anthropology. Otherwise, you'll think you're solving a problem, but you will not. So this regard is essential. Thank you for having raised that. And now I have an easy question for Arminio. We have these demands. We need to strengthen SUS. How will we finance SUS in the years to come? Well, we're talking here about a strange situation. As I said in the beginning, the public expenditure in Brazil has risen for the past 30 years, practically. However, SUS remains at this insufficient level of funding. So it is a matter of lack of prioritization. After all, the spaces there are important as the demands for resources, or Brazil is a country full of needs. So it is important to think about the whole situation. So it was said that we need to unite discipline, regards. I speak as an economist who tends to isolate himself, but I am understanding more the importance of understanding the political and social background of the forces. But when it comes to health and the budget, I see room, I see a space where we can work with needs that include other angles of the social policy. But the basic thing, as far as I see, is this. First of all, Brazil, the tax burden and the public expenditure have grown very much, but public investment in Brazil collapsed even then, and the health budget was not a priority compatible with what the Constitution says. So these are the contradictions. So Brazil is a medium income country, but with a tax system which is itself a source of inequality. And it is something that that is something to work on in terms of the income tax, the subsidies we have. There's room to work. And on the side of the expenditure, Brazil has 80% of its public expenditure going to payroll and social security. The majority of countries of medium income spend 60% or less. So there is room for research, for doing research thing. So we need to have a broader view of the budget, providing transparency to these strange things, which are the allocations to certain areas, which I would and public health should be prioritized. I find it complicated because, after all, what is in the budget has an owner. This is a problem of a country which has a pulverized politics, where parties are not clear in terms of their proposals, where important matters are canceled. And I sincerely do not know. I think in the end it will depend on politics, but we need to show what is wrong. So I think the tax burden can increase a little, but others might disagree. We need to discuss what will we do with the money. Likewise, so where does the money come from? In the end, it comes from the budget. And the budget has these characteristics, which I mentioned, which are unsustainable, totally unsustainable. So that is pretty much it. I think we need to find a political answer, after all, which it would be a well-informed political answer, which is the hope I have regarding our future. So thank you, Dr. Arminio. Now I'd like to ask to discuss technology a little further. And I'd like you, Dr. Gadelha, to tell us a little about investment in technology and science, and a little about the role this has in the strengthening of the future of SUS, of the Unified Health System. I'd like you to talk a little about the opportunities and perhaps what we still lack. The empty space we need to fill, the gap we need to bridge in Brazil in order to have this technological progress. Massive. First of all, after your speech about the North-South difference, the geopolitics of health, which is a theme we have been working on throughout my life, I cannot address this theme without emotion. I'll get to science and technology, but I like to say that there's a hypocrisy regarding the 2030 agenda, which is not only the Amazon, it is central, but the main theme of the 2030 agenda is to not leave anyone behind. We have countries which have 15% of the population buying 60% of the vaccine. This is unacceptable. It is a denial of the 2030 agenda. Perhaps as the most meritorious reference of a global system. So I find that important. And discussing with the students here, I think I was a classical industrial economist. I was going to study biotechnology, and Fiocruz was my field, the field for health. I was taken by the social area because we see technology and knowledge at the service of people. I started to think about Hanseníase, malaria, and childhood diarrhea. So the social field generates salaries, income, inclusion. A country cannot just extract ore and cut down the forest. So it is that geopolitics of knowledge, which is relevant, and we need to think about it as in 93% of the scientific resources were contingent in the middle of the pandemic. This is not minimally reasonable. A pandemic which showed the value of science. In order to reach something concrete, I think there are two areas which are essential for us to make progress. Our new epidemiological surveillance using genomics, the populational information that we should come before the disease, prior to the disease. And the pandemic shows that. And I'm not a doctor, but I'm a health professional. So COVID shows the difference between people, the variants. We need to get there before. And one thing we have made progress is in the sense of a precision public health. It is not only personalized medicine, but how do we have public health treating diversity with equity. So there, we have these as big challenges, and we can think about a scientific standard connected to the social needs. And students just think about it in their projects for thesis, dissertations, their activities. So it is worth and it is gratifying to commit yourself to the society you live in. Thank you very much, Dr. Gadelha. If the world had an integrated network, north-south, of genomics surveillance, so we could identify pathogens before they created a problem, I think this is the dream of anyone working in public health. So what I'd like to do now is to give you 1 minute. That is a challenge. 1 minute and perhaps 1 minute and a half for a final reflection. Remember, the majority of our audience is the future of Brazil, the students who will be the future scientists, the future decision makers. So I will start with my dear Professor Ligia. So for our students, the human being is frail and mortal, and there's no technology that can solve that. So we need to have health systems, health policies, because these policies help us to live longer and better. So come to the health system. The health system will be always a deliverer. Every day will be a debate on health. So health is a priority. So please be with us. And the idea that there will be no disease prevailed in the beginning of the Russian Revolution. They thought that with the end of capitalism, there will be the end of disease. So there were commissioners, a health commission, which was interesting. It is interesting to recover that idea, but no, what we have is a humankind, which is human, which we are very human and frail and connected to nature. So there is a reflection. So as we are too human, we are also very social, and the solution to any social problem is a social solution. So we need to have good politics. Now we have the CPI, the pandemic, the Congress inquiry on the pandemic. So we should leave this with a prospect of strengthening SUS. It is not, we need to transform all this process of destruction into a process of construction. So let's do it. We're together in this, and we're humans, mortal, and we need to organize ourselves. We need to participate. Thank you, Professor Ligia. Arminio? Almost impossible to speak after Ligia, so let's go. I could say, well, Ligia, take my minute and speak a little more, I would say. But, well, I really think, talking to students, that we need to really take control of our future. You need to keep on in this path of engagement, be it the public sector and politics, even in the private initiative. I think change of mentality is in progress. We are ahead, facing a gigantic challenge of the pandemic, but there's a medium-term existential challenge like climate change, and I think we need to put our feet on the ground, and that is what the theme is about, after all. So we're talking to Harvard students today, and then today we have Tabata Amaral, for example, who is a congresswoman. Follow this path. If you follow another path, don't go too far. Discuss the topics. Try to inform yourselves, because that is where the solution comes from. In the moment, we're in the phase of survival, of resistance. But I think it is possible to bet on the future, to sow some seeds, to get prepared, and windows of opportunity will open. And let's be ready and not miss the opportunity. So let's engage and believe in the future. We're frail, yes, fragile, but for as long as we're here, let's try. Let's insist. Thank you, Herminio. Carlos. So the biggest takeaway message I'd like to leave is that health is development. It incorporates three axis of sustainable development, social development, economic development, and environmental development. So to give an example of a country, I see everything that comes of our program as I see as an opportunity. Health mobilizes 9% of the GDP. We need to increase the funding, but it is a big system. It generates 8 million direct jobs. If we consider the indirect jobs, then it's 20 million jobs. Health is a solution to a way out of the crisis. So 1/3 of Brazilian science is in the field of health, allowing to generate innovation. So that actually brings us a huge challenge. And I'd like to encourage cross-functionality, to work, to talk with people from the economic and social areas. We cannot remain in our boxes. So, and to close, I would say that there's a thinker of public health that said, let's not think about our peers. Let's not think about peers, but about the odds, the peers, and those who are different as well. So health allows this, and I encourage, come to this agenda because it is wonderful and necessary to the future of Brazil. Thank you, Carlos. Minister? A great chance. If Eric Hobsbawm wrote a brief 20th century, starting from the First World War and the 1929 crash and ended with the man on the moon, the 21st century starts with this pandemic, which will be in the history books. How the world dealt with this challenge, which is not individual. The virus does not attack the individual, it attacks value, society, education, sports, culture, economy, and it looks at health and says, decipher me or I will devour you. We will need to modernize, to update our concepts. Whoever planned something prior to the pandemic with his certainties, his little world is now kind of lost because his certainties and his castles were demolished, and now needs to reinvent himself. And this is a chance for everybody to reset, to start over, to think over, to the world is leaving the age of us and them. Now it's us. So, and how will you place yourself in this story? How will you leave your impression to the world in technology and study? You're in Harvard. I was there once. I took a course. I went to Atlanta, and I chose to come back to Brazil because it was physically important. But now that you are there, you can be anywhere in the world, and you will be connected to the social problems of Brazil. And there are those social problems in Africa, and let's make this a better world. I am very optimistic, and the brief 21st century has just begun, but we I hope we don't take until the end of the 21st century to understand that the chance has been given to everyone. The cards are on the table. Disarm your spirits. Don't become prisoners of any ideology or of any absolute certainty. So please come, dialogue, and by means of this plural and horizontal dialogue, we will come out better and bigger, not only as persons, but also as big health systems, systems to fight climate change, to fight structural racism, which exists, fight the inequalities, and that is coming from policies making this these rules to be measured, for there to be metrics, so we can know what our role in the 21st century is. I would like to thank the organizing committee for the invitation. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank each of you for dedicating an hour of this Saturday to us to divide knowledge with our students, but also to serve as a source of inspiration. And I hope the students can use this discussion and remember that it is important to know Brazil. It is important to study history. Please study history. Please know how we got here, because many of the problems we see here have their roots in history. Understand Brazil and remember always the Guimarães Rosa, what life wants from us is courage. So each one of us who is working in research and in science knowledge, that every person working the front line, and each of you students who are starting now, do not give up, have courage to go on, and that we may all have courage to make high quality science, to raise the voice of science more than ever. So may you all have a good morning and a good
Hello, everyone. My name is Gustavo Coutinho, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Brazil Conference. It is my honor to introduce this panel about leadership. We have three amazing speakers. Jorge Paulo Lemann is the founder and chairman of Fundação Lemann, and one of the co-founders of the investment firm 3G Capital. Fabrício Blois is the CEO of iFear and board president and founder at Movil. Nitin Auria served as the 10th dean of the Harvard Business School from 2010 to 2020. It is my honor now to pass the word to Nitin.
Thank you, Gustavo. And it is a true privilege to be with all of you in this Brazil conference, something that I'm very fond of. And of course, it's an extraordinary privilege for me to have this opportunity to be in the midst of a conversation with two amazing leaders, Jorge Paulo Lemann and Fabrizio Biosi. So I'm going to start the conversation, and the way we're going to get started, Jorge Paulo and Fabrizio, is that everybody who is on this call probably knows you from the many, many things that have been written about you. But I'm going to try and create a little bit more of a picture of who you are, how you think, by asking you a series of quick lightning round types of questions. We'll do that for a few minutes and get your responses. So some of them may be one-word responses, some of them may be sentence-long responses, but let's try and keep it to sentences and not paragraphs. That's the only rule for this first part. So I'll start with both of you to ask you the question: who was the person who had the greatest influence on your life in your early years? When you think back to your childhood, who would you say was the person who had the greatest impact on who you've become today? Fabrizio, I'll start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, Nitin and Jorge Paulo. A big influence to me when it thinks about thinking big was Bill Gates. So since the beginning, I always benchmarked Bill Gates on everything.
Jorge Paulo, for you.
It was my mother. She was very close to me. My father died very early. And my mother was a very strong character and had a very big influence in my early age.
That's great. I remember distinctly in my own life watching the lunar landing. For some reason, I was one of the few kids in my class that was chosen to see Apollo 11 land on the moon. We had to go to the television station in India because at that time television was not widely available. And I remember that being the instance that first sparked my technological imagination. Jorge Paulo, who sparked your technological imagination? Do you remember an event that was technologically important to you?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I liked reading about inventors very much. And Edison was the guy who really sparked my imagination when I was a kid. A person who invented so many different things and failed in many and tried again and kept going and really had a big influence in all this technological world that we have today.
Do you know that he's still the business person with the largest number of patents on his name yet ever? So even though there have been so many other people that have come since Edison, Edison remains the #1 patented business person in the world still today. So it's quite extraordinary. And Fabrizio, for you, when you think about an early technological invention that may have shaped your life, what was that?
I was fascinated by Star Trek, Star Wars, science fiction. And then there was the personal computer growth, like the MSX, a very old personal computer, the first PC XT. And these two computers plus the science fiction made me start dreaming, and I haven't stopped yet.
That's so wonderful. In your teenage years, if your friends had to describe you using 3 words, how would your friends have described you as a teenager? Fabrizio, how would your friends have described you as a teenager in 3 words? What 3 words would they use?
Thinking about computers, visionary and thinking about computers, shy. I am usually shy. And from Bahia, so I'm a shy Baiano that loves
Is that even a possibility? I thought that was an impossibility, but it sounds like there is such a thing as a shy Baiano. Okay. And Jorge Paulo, you?
Oh, I was known as an athlete, tennis player, surfer, beach person, etc. That's what I was known for.
Okay. When you went to college, what was your favorite course in college, or a teacher who had a particular impact on you in college? Jorge Paulo.
Uh, it may sound strange because I went into business but actually at Harvard, I really enjoyed the philosophy courses. Reading Aristotle and Socrates, and had a very good philosophy professor, Raphael Demos, and so that was it was a surprise to me, but I really liked philosophy.
See, I would
It's a
never have guessed that
surprise.
too, but it's a wonderful
Yeah.
thing. I think this is the advantage of doing this thing. You learn things about people that you would have never known. Fabrizio, for you?
I was much more nerd, so computer science, programming, that was physics. That was the kind of thing I loved in
It
college.
looks like you got onto this science computer bug very, very early in your life, and it seems to have been spread through, as I'm getting a sense of who you are.
I started with 8 years old programming. And that's
So
what
when
I'm
you
doing.
were graduating college, did you imagine that you would be who you are today?
No, I imagine 100 times bigger and with more impact in the world, but it still has a lot of years ahead, so I'm confident.
So you had even bigger visions for yourself when you were graduating from college than you've already accomplished.
I don't look very much to the past of what I have already accomplished. I think I'm in a very nice journey, doing very nice things, and I think we can transform the world for the better through technology, through innovation, through impact. So I really don't, we are doing many things, yes, but the next 10 years, it's going to be super amazing. I keep focusing on that.
That's great. And Jorge Paulo, what did you think you were going to be when you graduated Harvard?
For a while I was a tennis player. I continued the tennis play, played the tennis circuit, and then decided to go to work. And when I went to work, I wanted to do something big, and I wanted to copy what I had seen in the States and do something in finance, which could be big. And that was Banco Garantia, and from there evolved to buying companies and trying to improve them, basically. So the idea is always big, always big.
That's interesting. So maybe I'll take a 10-second deep dive into this. Both of you very early on wanted to do things that were big. Where do you think this came from? Do you have any sense of where that desire to do something very big came from early on?
I don't really know where it came from, but I was always extremely competitive. I loved competition. I mean, I love competing to compete. And if you love competition, you like doing bigger things or doing better or improving or like that.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Like I sometimes these days complain that we've reached a world in which young people are given prizes just for playing as opposed to actually competing and winning. So I share your view that, there's something so profoundly powerful about the power of competition. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Fabrizio, where did your vision for doing something big come from, you think?
I read a book I remember very well when I was like 16, 17, and it said you should write down your goals for 20 years, and they should be so big that you should tell your friends and they should smile and say, come on, this is completely impossible. And if they don't say that, it's not big enough. And when I was 16, 17, I wrote down many very big dreams. And I still every year write it down and keep saying what I'm going to do this year, next 5, next 10, next 20. My original big dream was fly helicopters around the city, but I am a helicopter pilot and I like very much. And also today, my big dream is going to the moon, and I'm going to do there soon too. So I was thinking new big dreams, and every time my company has more purpose-driven big dreams, and now we want to have a global impact in education environments. So it became part of our culture. Start the year, think what we are going to do, think 10, 20 years, write down and put on the wall, and let's make everyone work together to get there.
Huh. What is the biggest risk you think you took in your life? Jorge Paulo, when you look back, is there a moment when you were doing it that felt very, very risky, where you say, that didn't feel like it was an easy decision, and yet I took this big risk and it paid off?
There were always smaller risks, I was always taking risks. And one of the advantages of my mother was that she allowed me a lot of freedom to go out and do things. So I was always taking risks, traveling where I shouldn't or doing what I shouldn't. And so you get a sense of risk. But I guess the biggest risk we took was eventually in business when we had a market cap of about $25 billion or something like that, and we decided to buy Anheuser-Busch for $54 billion, and with borrowed money. So that was a rather big risk in 2009 when the financial markets were falling apart and like that. So,
wow. And Fabrizio, for you?
It's difficult to compete after that.
I was going to say there's not very many people in the world who would take a risk like that. I agree with you.
Yes. But many people ask me, what is the biggest innovation you did, the biggest idea or the biggest risk? That's really how I do not see the company like that. We every month are taking big risks, changing the direction of the business, changing the structure, betting in new business, changing what we believe. I think the most important thing on our group is we change everything every 6 months, everything. So I think the big risk was like last week, we decided to enter some new business, and I'm always super nervous it's going to work or not. Probably it's not going to work, but ever 5 things that go completely wrong, we do one very, very right. And then we do a speech like 1 year later and they say, oh, how you are smart, you did something well. Actually, we did lots of things that did completely wrong, but 1 or 2, sometimes we get it right. So all the time.
You know, I don't know about the two of you, but I must admit that when Facebook first came out, if someone had told me that Facebook would one day become one of the most valuable companies in the world, I would have just died laughing. I just couldn't believe that this was something that was a real business. And there are times today when I still wonder, why is this a real business? And so it's a kind of technology that has always surprised me. Is there something in life like that which you just underestimated, where you say, you know, like when I first saw this thing, I said, oh my God, like this is going to be nothing, and look how big it has become since.
Go ahead.
I'm smiling here, something very absurd. I remember the day Steve Jobs launched the iPhone, and I was watching live as I do all the time. And then I said, oh, it's amazing, but obviously no one can buy this thing. It's like for the super rich. And then today we have like billions of smartphones. All my business is based on smartphones. And I worked with smartphones by that time. And even so, I left it. And
it's amazing, right? And Jorge Paulo, for you?
I mean, what I would say is that some things that looked very bad and were resulted from a crisis actually turned out very well. I bought a brokerage house in 1971. I was going to be a stockbroker. The market collapsed, the stock market collapsed. I was forced to become a bond broker, which became a very big business, much better than stockbroking. Later, one of the biggest banks in the world wanted to join us to make an investment bank together. And we were very keen on that. And then it didn't work out. So we were left on our own, and we had to create the investment bank by ourselves. The purchase of Anheuser-Busch, for 20 years, we had thought of buying them. We wanted to buy them. And then the occasion came, but the occasion came with the end of the world in financial markets. And it was pretty scary. And it turned out very, very well. I mean, that is the biggest part of our business, our beer business, the most profitable, etc. So I've been surprised that sometimes things which result from a crisis and don't look good actually turn out pretty good.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to ask you, to now for a minute be investors, and we're going to go long and short on a series of things. And so simply the answer here is, are you going to go long? Are you going to go short? And in one sentence, why? So long or short, cryptocurrencies. Fabrizio.
Long, not specifically Bitcoin, but the technology to distributed finance.
Jorge?
Long, agree with him.
Okay. SpaceX. Long or short?
Super long. I even have like SpaceX here. I think space is going to be a new frontier. We are going to travel all around space and moon and much further. So I think we are just starting. The next 100 years, everything is going to change.
Jorge Paulo?
I'm not so long on that one. I like it around here. I like everything here. There's a lot to do here. So I'm not one of those guys that is very anxious to get up there and in space and travel around.
Okay. Tesla, which is now 500 billion rising every day. Fabrizio, long or short on Tesla?
I'm short, very short, but I've been wrong for the last 1 year. So probably I'm wrong again, but short. I think the competition on electric cars is going to increase 100 times. Tesla is amazing. I love Tesla, but the competition is going to increase 100 times. So everyone else will have a very good electric car, and that's valuation's a little too high.
Jorge Paulo?
I'm short, but I have a wife who's a big believer in Tesla and has been an investor since the beginning and won't sell. So I'm hedged.
Probably he's right.
That's a great way to do it. General Motors. Long or short, Fabrizio?
Sorry? Who? Sorry.
General Motors.
Short,
General Motors.
Short.
So you don't think that these old companies have a prayer, even though your concern with Tesla is that it might be overvalued?
I think the point about General Motors is everyone else are going to invest much more, have to innovate much more, and have to start succeeding in a new market that are being created right now. So okay. General Motors has to start delivering the others too.
Okay. I get it. ExxonMobil.
Short. I think when you talk about innovation, the future is lots of green technology. We have a lot of innovation related to that. So short.
Jorge Paulo?
I'm short also.
Okay. Amazon. Long or short?
Long. Great company, great culture, growing a lot, think very big, innovating a lot.
Jorge Paulo?
I'm neutral on that. I'm suspicious of things when they get too big, too many people against it, and so I'm neutral. I admire enormously what has been built up to now.
But from now onwards, you're more neutral.
What?
What about Walmart?
Yeah.
Neutral. Jorge Paulo is the specialist in Walmart here.
Yeah.
Neutral?
Neutral, yeah.
Fabrizio?
I think I said neutral, but there is a little short trend because of the very fast delivery. We have a big change in the delivery, even of groceries. I think it's changing all around the world now. So new companies has again to innovate. I think most of the older companies, we are short because I am short because they need to innovate, reinvent themselves. If they can do it, they are going to succeed. Otherwise, lots of bad time ahead.
Okay. I'm going to ask you two more and then we'll move on. Robinhood.
I've bought some shares.
That doesn't seem like a very enthusiastic long, but I guess you're long if you bought some shares.
Yeah.
I might be wrong again because I don't like to bet against Jorge Paulo, but I'm a little short, not because of the model, but because there is a little, the market's a little too hot. Everyone invested in everything. And I think we'll have some corrections before we get to a long-term growth that is going to happen after some corrections.
Okay. China.
Long
or short in China?
Oh, I'm long. It's different, but they will not slow down in the next 20 years, I don't think.
Fabrizio, you?
The biggest benchmarks for Movile and iFood were Bill Gates, then Jorge Paulo, then Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley was a big benchmark. Today is China. Technology innovation in China is amazing. I go there as much as I can. Right now I can't, but usually I go there a lot. Level of innovation, speed, the way they think disruption. I think it's long because it's a country really innovating, and we have to take out the ideology and see how fast they are moving. And this is something to inspire other countries like Brazil.
So now I'm going to ask the last question of this type. Brazil, long or short?
Long. I think we have lots of challenges right now. I love the theme of this event, that is dialogue. I think in Brazil and all around the world, we need much more dialogue. There is no dialogue in Brazil right now. But after we get dialogue, after we innovate and have also more efficient companies, we will find our way to grow much more.
Long, and I think it's a relatively easy fix if we can get all the right people and better governance. And that's why we invest so much in people and sending people to Kennedy School and like that, because hoping that they will come back. And even though some are from the left or from the right, they'll talk to one another and reach pragmatic solutions. So that's my hope.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I hope through these little questions, all of you in the audience got a little bit of a better sense of who our two leaders are and how they think about a whole range of issues. And as you can tell, there are some things on which they agree and there are some things on which they disagree, which I think is what makes life interesting and fun. So now I'm going to turn and ask you each to do something quite different. Fabrizio, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to say, if you are thinking about ABI, which, as Jorge Paulo says, is the biggest business in his portfolio, and you were an analyst, what would you say to Jorge Paulo are the strengths and weaknesses of ABI? And Jorge Paulo, I'm going to ask you to do the same on iFood in a little bit. But I'm going to start with you, Fabrizio. Break down ABI for us.
Let me say some good things first. There is a legend on Jorge Paulo story that he's always benchmarked the best companies in the world, benchmarked Goldman Sachs and Walmart and learned from them. And our company benchmarked ABI a lot. So I was a partner of Jorge Paulo, and we really learned a lot about their culture. We really copied a lot of what ABI does well. So talking about the big things, a culture that dreams very big, and I think this is critical to every big venture. We always challenge ourselves to being bigger because of the ABI dreams. A result-oriented culture, a people-oriented culture where they look for very good people and they empower very good people based on their results, not where they come from. So I think our values from empower the best people, searching for the best people, be a results-oriented company, and people in the center of everything came from ABI. So thank you, Jorge Paulo. We really learned a lot. I think the one thing that historically I perceive was not so strong, but don't put me in a very bad position here, is that this openness to disruptively innovate. And I think when you look to my company, we try to say, look, we just copy ABI, and then we put like a Silicon Valley part that say we are completely open to disrupt innovation. Talking about Harvard topics, we call it an ambidextrous organization. So we should obsess about results plus do everything new, challenge your own business, bet in 100 new things. But to be honest, that's what Jorge Paulo told 2 years ago in this conference, if I'm not wrong. And he said that was his biggest goal was to make ABI take much more risks and more innovative. So I'm sure, based on their story, that they are going to succeed.
So that's the weakness that you think that so far you don't see that the company has done enough to be disruptive to itself in the way in which you would like it to be. Jorge Paulo, break down iFood for us. What do you see as since you were an investor for a period as well? And
we are, he's a much younger company, and he has been much more consumer-centric than we ever were. We were production, efficiency, producing cheaply, distributing well, etc. And he's always very focused on his consumers and who are his clients and like that, which we weren't enough, quite frankly. Since he's technically oriented, he is much more digitally savvy than we are. I think we trained people in a very similar way. The guys who were cost cutters, efficient, but not really innovators or like that. And since we run the company with very clear metrical goals and like that. The innovators are sort of shut out a little bit because you can't really measure them in immediate return and like that. So I think he's right. We have not been consumer centric enough. We have not been innovative enough. And, well, we're trying to, it's hard to change a culture of something very big, which has been successful. But I think we are on the way to doing it now. And I think another thing, you know, he is running a big platform that has access to clients and like that. We have to create our own platform also, and we're doing that. So we will have direct access to many consumers and like that. So that is going on. Where I would criticize him, I'm from the old school. I love to see a bottom line. A bottom line thrills me. And this business of building, and someday there will be a bottom line bothers me. So that's what he's doing, you know. He's delivering 60 million meals per month now. It was 20 million a year ago or something like that. But I like to see the bottom line. It worries me. I mean, Amazon has flipped the world in terms of, for so many years, investing in growth, and eventually they can show the profit. Will some of these other people who are trying to do that be able to show profit? I don't know. So that's my doubt.
So Fabrizio, how
took notes here.
This is a big question that some people have, right? And particularly in the iFood business, is that at some level, for a period of time, it looks like there's a transfer from investors to consumers in these businesses, because you just have to acquire share. And this has been true of Uber. This has been true of so many of these companies where there's a very large amount of capital that goes in. And the capital is going in on the assumption that if you gain critical mass and then beyond that, unit economics keep improving and then you'll make profit at some point. And yet there are people like Jorge Paulo who at some level say that, you know, what are the real, I mean, at some point, if the business proves itself, are your riders, for example, vulnerable to join some other platform? What will make things sticky? Do I care about iFood, or in the US, if it's Uber Eats and Deliveroo or everything else? Like there's 100 different ways in which I can compete. How do you respond to people who ask this question of you that, you know, will someday you be profitable? Or do you say, I don't care, by that time I'll have made enough money and I can just get out?
I don't think at all at getting out. I'm thinking about building as nice company as Jorge Paulo has built. So we have a lot to growth ahead. I'm going to stop talking about growth when we get to Amazon size. So let me keep focusing on growth for now. But what you just described is not the only way to do tech companies. There are many companies. We have excess of liquidity in the world. There are many venture capitalists putting like $1 billion in any company that's destroy money, giving, for example, vouchers for customers, and they don't look for efficiency. I talk exactly the opposite. We have to use technology innovation to deliver efficiency. We have to use AI the cost of delivery should be smaller. We deliver today in less than 30 minutes, 27 minutes average time. We have to use technology to enable people to receive things in 10, 15, or 20 minutes at the lowest cost. We have to help restaurants. Today, we have helped 300,000 restaurants through technology. But the way is not just put money and keep growing. The way is search for efficiency through technology. The company right now has a social purpose that is, during the pandemic, we have to support the drivers, we have to support the restaurants. We are spending much more money getting better conditions to drivers and security and safety for customers, restaurants, and drivers. But this company can be profitable, will be profitable when this is the right moment. We believe that the food delivery business is the beginning of its journey. People eat 90 times per month. 100 years ago, we used to build our own shirt at home. I believe in the future, we're not going to do our own food at home. We are just going to talk to your watch, and the watch is going to deliver the best food you want, even without you ordering, in the time that you want, cheaper and best quality and healthier. So we are in the beginning of a very disruptive trend that changed trillions of dollars of how the world works. Can we be profitable today? If this was the biggest goal, yes. But there is so much innovation opportunity, not only to make money, because that's not our goal today, but to benefit the society through better and cheaper food, to use technology to create new work. That my goal today is not to be profitable. My goal today is to have this impact.
And Fabrizio, do you think that this just mindset, which is this mindset that you are willing to say, yes, I know that at some point I have to be profitable, but as long as I can keep improving unit economics, the only goal right now should be growth. And the reason why traditional companies sometimes fail is because for them, this metric of profitability ends up being so important in the near term that they just can't make the bets that you're making. Is that one of the reasons why when we went long short, you essentially went short on every established company? I'm just kind of curious whether you think that the very thing that Jorge Paulo wants to see is the thing that gets in the way of companies like that being truly digitally forward.
I think this is one reason, and obviously the market asks for this company to deliver profitability. It's not the case right now, but usually it is. I think there is a second reason, that is what Jorge Paulo just said. The biggest the company gets, you have not an ambidextrous culture. So as the company gets bigger, you try to look more to, I need to deliver on these KPIs, and not on, I need to do that, and I need to disrupt and think about the future, to have an exponential mindset and think about how we are going to change the world inside this company. Then you stop doing that, and after maybe 10 to 20 years, we stop being a big company. You see there's a famous chart from Harvard that say the top 500 companies just stay at least today by 17 years. It used to be 50 years many years ago. So I would say it's a composite of profiting too much in the short term, plus a lack of ambidextrous mindset to look for the long term.
What do you think, Jorge Paulo? Do you think that this view that you have, which I must confess that as a business school dean, I have often also been focused on, which is in the end, businesses have to produce like positive free cash flow.
I agree.
That we're all going to be run over by people like Fabrizio, and someday we'll recognize that we were too conservative? Or do you feel like...
No, I feel there will be the winners there. There will be some winners, and there will be a lot of losers. And that's the way I look at it. And it's hard to see exactly who will be the winners. And, you know, the winners will be those that, for some reason or another, they attract all this volume and they grow, but they also have some moat, something which gives them a competitive advantage of some sort. And many of these businesses which are building themselves up on volume and like that really don't have that moat. There's always room for a little guy to come in and compete. So I would try to evaluate which one of these businesses, which is on a high growth strategy and like that, really has a moat of some type that to protect it. And the others, I would skip.
Fabrizio, in the same
way. Let me agree with Jorge Paulo a little, because you want me to disagree. I'm not going to disagree with Jorge Paulo. Actually, I totally agree with him. And that's why I don't believe in this thing like the new business versus the old business. There is a lot of money going to internet companies. 2/3 are going to bankrupt. We are going to see billions of dollars losing for the companies that are just using money to compete. Money that's just using money to compete are going to fail. So it's not like the company that grows versus the company that doesn't grow. My point is, you have to grow and you have to look for efficiency using technology and innovation to get to this efficient end moat, as Jorge Paulo said. So many of these companies we see are going to disappear, and that's part of life.
Let me ask you the question the other way around, which is, you know, so let's imagine that there's some financial correction that occurs, which I think will cause 2/3 of these current companies that are not sustainable to go away, right? These new age companies that are being built on growth. And we've seen this at least twice before. We saw this in the 2000 correction which occurred of the first internet bubble. We saw this again a second time. And I think that there will be a third moment in which such a correction will come.
Yeah.
But in the same way, do you think that if you take the current Fortune 100 companies, the established companies that have been around for 50, 60 years, let's talk about not whether they're new or old, but they've just been around a long time. ABI would be a good example, P&G, Unilever. Sure. We can take all of these companies that have 50, 100-year proud histories.
Yeah.
They are also having to go through this moment of digital transformation. Do you think that the survival rate there will also be 1 in 3?
Yeah, maybe 1 in 3 on both groups is good enough. Maybe 2 in 3 because they are bigger and established. But look to the ABI example you just described. Jorge Paulo consistently talk publicly about how they are reinventing, investing in innovation, and they think that they should talk more with customers. So some companies that are more mature are looking to how do I use the new technologies. And let me tell you one thing. Sometimes we think we are going to this internet thing and mobile thing, and it's the first time in history it happens. For sure not. We've been through many technology disruption cycles and waves over the last 300 years. Electricity and cars and telecommunications and mobile phones, each one of these waves completely changed the winning companies. The thing is the cycles are shorter now. So if the company is not good enough to also look for the next cycle, your chance of surviving go smaller. Reduce your chance of surviving. So some of these companies are going to win big and be benchmarks of the future. But the big thing is, are you ready to keep learning and to keep changing and adapting? I think a smaller company, Jorge Paulo said, as we are, it's easier to innovate, and the bigger companies is more difficult, but that's their challenge, and I'm sure lots of them are going to succeed and be a benchmark, as ABI already is.
So, Jorge Paulo, I'm going to ask the question to you in a more sharp way. If you were to take 10 years out, 2030, and we were to ask ourselves the question, top 100 companies in the world, will existing companies continue to be the majority on the list, or will new companies like the one that Fabrizio are building replace at a faster rate the existing companies on that list?
Oh, I think the new companies will be the majority. I think some of the old companies will survive and will adapt and will do well. But I think the majority, it's going on already. I mean, you know, who are the top companies now? It's Google, Facebook.
Yeah, top 10, 8 of the top 10 are companies that did not exist 20 years ago.
Yeah, so I think that will continue, quite frankly. I think that will continue.
What does it take in the few minutes that we have? I know, Jorge Paulo, you have to get to another call in 5 minutes. I want to try and end. Here are all these young people who are going to graduate and are going to be at the beginning of the next phase of their lives. I'm sure that just in listening to the two of you, they've taken some lessons. But if you had to say to people, what leadership capacities should they build now to be successful in these first 10, 15 years of their career, which end up being so important, right? Like my experience is that in the first 10 years, you either get on this cycle, which will allow you to be able to not just dream big, but dream bigger over time. Each of you, in the little bit of time that we have left, what would you say are the leadership capacities that you look for in young people, where you say, you know, if I have a young person who shows these characteristics, I'd be willing to make a bet on that? Jorge Paulo, I'll start with you.
Well, we have always been very focused on people. So, you know, we make a big effort to attract the best people, to follow them, to train them, to give them an opportunity like that. And basically, they good people come in all sorts. We like people who deliver. You know, some people deliver, some don't deliver. We like people that can lead others, can stimulate others, and can create a little dream that they see that it happens. We like people that work together well. We obviously only want ethical people. When you have somebody who's not ethical, it doesn't work at all. So, and we like people who are ready to experiment and take a few risks. Companies, quite frankly.
And Fabrizio, you?
talking about leadership characteristics, first entrepreneurs with big dreams. And I think I learned a lot from Jorge Paulo on that. So thank you, Jorge Paulo. When I talk about big dreams, in our case, it's like dream about $100 billion company, but also with a big purpose. So we talk a lot about how to make life better for 1 billion people with impact in education and environment and inclusion. And we need people with passion that say, I'm passionate about that and I'm not going to deliver at all. I'm going to do until the end. I'm going to really make it happen. People obsessed about results and that deliver, as Jorge Paulo said, again, we learned a lot from them. And try to add 1 or 2 things. Innovation is critical, that is open to do everything different and open for change. Most people don't like to change, and we force them, you have to be open to change. Everything's going to change, your title, your position. Be open to change. The only thing is change and keep learning. And 2 characteristics that I look for, therefore, is 1, be ambidextrous, so innovation and discipline. And the second is be also ready to make the big decisions. I think we are not talking a lot about that anymore, but we have to take lots of big decisions being entrepreneur. We need to delegate all the decisions. We need to hire people better than us. We need to lose money on bets because most of the bets go wrong. We need to fire lots of people and to work hard. So people that are ready to really commit and take these hard decisions is the people we look for.
What is it that you most hope that this generation of people who are listening to the two of you will do that your generation did not do?
I come from a generation which was very focused on making money. And, I think the new generations have a bigger concern for the world, for the environment, for general progress and like that. So I think they will contribute to a better world than us guys of 50 years ago who were trying to make a buck. And, they can make a buck and they can probably contribute more to making this a better world.
And Fabrizio?
I'm going to learn with Jorge Paulo and also make a buck, as he's saying, but this is also important. But also, I love the World Economic Forum material. I think you work with them also knitting. They talk a lot about stakeholder capitalism. You should talk about balance sheet, but also ESG goals. And I think this is going to be part of the new normal world. And I think this is great. But I want to say one more thing. The level of disruption and change is all in the future. Everything is ahead of us. We have fintech, we have crypto, we have synthetic biology, CRISPR, carbon credits economy, green economy, AI is going to change everything. Everything is ahead of us. So the new generation, all the big opportunities start 2021. So let's go for that and make a buck and change the world. I can't see a better time to work on that.
I want to thank the two of you. We're coming to the end of our time, and I want to thank everyone in the audience. I hope you were as inspired as I am listening to and learning from these two extraordinary leaders. And what I love is that Jorge Paulo proves that you can have extraordinary passion for doing a business your entire life. He still has the passion that you have, which I find so extraordinary. And those of you who are in your 20s, please take heart from what Jorge Paulo and Fabrizio said. The opportunities that lie ahead of you are endless, and we are looking for your leadership to make this world both a better place, but we hope that along the way you'll make a buck too. So all the very best. Take good care. Thank you all for including us and for being a part of this conversation. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Olá, pessoal. Depois dessa manhã incrível, estamos aqui diretamente do Cristo Redentor que comemora.
So after this amazing morning, we're here from the Christ statue to thank you for your participation, and please stay with us. We still have panels this afternoon. So at least I'll say goodbye to you, me, and I thank all the Brazil conference team who had this theme of dialogue to transform. And Gabriel, the floor is yours. Thank you, Alex, for being with us for those 7 days of conference. But I'd like to conclude this first block saying that we'll be back at 5:30 for the last two panels of this 2021 edition. And I thank everybody who's watching. And I hope to see you again at 7:30 Brazilian time. Brasilia time.
Um impulso muda tudo. Muda o todo, muda o mundo. Um impulso e seu negócio já não está mais no mesmo lugar. E aqui, todo mundo, startup e grande corporação, vai concordar. O cenário de inovação é um cenário de incertezas. E faz sentido que seja assim. Se é inovação, é porque ainda não foi feito. Na FabStart, acreditamos num futuro em que startups e corporações aqui no Brasil se tornarão benchmarks de inovação para o mundo. E a FabStart, protagonista dessa transformação. Já deu para imaginar o que esse impulso pode fazer por você? FabStart, desafio aceito. Comece agora.